America's modern history began after World War II, when it became the economic powerhouse of the world. During the roughly 1945 to 1968 period, Americans saw their country as most never could have imagined it pre-war. This period in American history is highly regarded as the best the country could ever be. Everything was new, newborns were plentiful, and most families, for the first time, had their very own homes in the suburbs, with a front yard, a backyard, and the freedom to decorate in any which way they pleased. At least, that's how it was if you were in a white, middle-class household. There was a stark contrast between the prosperous lives that were led by nuclear white families and almost everybody else. Segregation ran rampant, racist and sexist tendencies were seldom in short supply, and mental illness was wildly mistreated, just to name a few of the hardships endured by millions. There were a plethora of other conflicts in this time that took center stage and had to be taken head-on during this period. Take communism, for example. There was a looming threat that communism would take over America, and with that, an opportunity arose for a particularly sick individual, Key Senator Joseph McCarthy. Joseph McCarthy took an extreme form of anti-communist. He used fear-mongering to ruin the careers and lives of anyone who was so much as suspected of being a communist. So much of this had too big an impact to be cast aside, and in many instances is still present in some capacity today. This is why I believe it's important to bring these heavy topics to light when talking about American culture in the middle of the 20th century. If we focus solely on the good, we run the risk of forgetting the atrocities committed during that era, and by extension, we run the risk of repeating them. Now, a similarly important aspect to learn from history is art, but unlike the aforementioned hardships, I think that artistic movements are deliciously swell to repeat. America's economic boom in the 1950s meant that people had more money to spend, and companies from all over the country had noticed. So they took action and capitalized on citizens' expendable income, and so for the next 2 decades, future-inspired design reigned supreme in American homes. An artistic utopia had materialized, and the simplicity of this brand new atomic age of futuristic design meant that it was versatile. It was called mid-century modern, and everybody loved it, hence its rampaging omnipotence. The future was now, and there was no escape. It was in their homes, their cars, television, magazines, movies, hotels, motels, restaurants, theme parks, the airport, and forever implanted in their psyche. It's worth mentioning that on the other side of the spectrum, the Wild West and cowboys were very popular. Some of the most well-known television series and films were westerns, like Gunsmoke starring James Arness and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly starring Clint Eastwood. This of course shows that there was much more than just one popular form of culture during this time period, so much more than I can cover in one short documentary. Additionally, this gives me an excuse to show off a beautiful Smith & Wesson, which is an American Wild West style restaurant that serves beers, cocktails, wines, and a variety of American dishes. Some of my favorites are the Kansas chicken, the New Yorker, and ribs and wings. To complement the food, the entire establishment is decorated floor to ceiling with a myriad cowboy-inspired decorations. As with all popular art trends, mid-century modern eventually died out, and for several decades, people's interest was almost completely diminished. That's all, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and farewell. And we're back. Throughout the late 2010s and early 2020s, mid-century modern slowly started to revive itself and made its way into conglomerates' catalogues. Take IKEA for example. Their American catalogue is currently filled with mid-century modern inspired pieces of furniture, some of it being so popular that it borderlines on cliché. Even authentic pieces have made a comeback. They are being discovered in thrift stores all over America, being sought after by an increasing number of devoted vintage ephemera collectors. Various and usually vivacious vintage aficionados have recently gained traction online, growing bigger by the year. Their passion and enthusiasm for their hobby is rarely encountered in everyday life, which is why I think that they are so popular. In 2020 especially, their growth has been exponential because they provide the world with their optimism and pride in a time where qualities of that nature are scarce. I think that most people with this passion had the seed planted in their childhoods. They would hear stories from or of their family, and mid-century modern furniture, decor, or even their cars would still be around, etc. This can be traced to an interview by the In The Know YouTube channel, where they speak to Lacey Faye, a content creator on YouTube and Instagram, who lives her life with a vintage style. I really honed in on the 1950s because of my grandparents. They got married in 1955, and their stories, it just made it sound like the best time ever. Of course, this can be construed as an extreme lifestyle, one of an idea that can only be entertained by people with a real connection to the era. However, this doesn't mean that their affinity with America's mid-century look can't be shared with other people, because its simple and quaint mood can appeal to anyone. Post-World War II America has a unique place in history, from its ubiquitous futuristic aesthetic, which, by the way, still exists in America today, to the happy-go-lucky lives of middle-class Americans. Its influence remains over 50 years after it concluded at the dawn of the 70s. Peace.